everyone for joining us today. I'm with Marty Britton, who's the president and CEO of Britton Management Profile, the first ever reference checking company in Canada, which is fascinating. That's amazing. I actually didn't know that. And we've been working together for a very long time. That's awesome. That's amazing. So incorporated in 1974, Britton Management Profiles has been in business for over 45 years. So I can call you BMP for short, right?
Absolutely.
Amazing. So BMP is passionate in helping their clients make informed hiring decisions so that they can hire the best talent available. With a strong global presence, BMP conducts verification checks in a variety of countries. When Marty took over the company from her father, the late David Britton, 27 years ago, the only service the company offered was reference checking. Continuing the bold Britton legacy, Marty has since added a wide range of pre-employment screening services to their list of products, from criminal and credit checks, global sanctions, fingerprinting, education, employment verification, and exit interviews. In addition, they're excited to offer social media checks. And most recently, BMP has launched an identity verification tool using the power of artificial intelligence to ensure the person is who they say they are, which I think is extremely important right now, especially with everything being done online. So smart pivot for you, Marty. That's amazing, an amazing tool for anyone in HR and recruitment. So we're very honored that you could be with us today. We really appreciate the time that you've spent preparing this content. And I'll be back towards the end. I'll leave it to you.
Okay. All right. Good. So you can hear me now just fine?
You look amazing.
Okay. Awesome. Thanks. Well, thanks, Rachel, for the introduction. So people in the audience, as Rachel mentioned, we've been doing this since 1974. It's our job to make sure you know who you're hiring. And the reality is, job candidates lie. So if you were to come to our office when COVID is over, you're welcome to come. I'd like to introduce you to our creepy guy. We haven't given him a name. We just refer to him as the creepy guy, and he greets you at the door of our office when you come in. So again, sadly, job candidates lie. I'm hoping that the chat feature is working, because I'd just like a little bit of participation here from the audience. If you can send me some percentages of candidates that you think lie when they're applying for the job. Can I see the chat feature down there? I'm not seeing that chat feature. Rachel, can you chime in and see if you can see the chat feature down below? No, I'm not seeing it. Okay, so normally I ask this question, and I'll just give you some information. What I typically see in terms of response to this is anywhere, usually in the average range of 40, maybe 50% of people think the job candidates lie. Well, the reality is 78% of job candidates misrepresent themselves on their resume, and this is according to a study that was conducted in February of 2020. 78% of job candidates lie. That's a pretty high, staggering number when you come to think about it. And it might not be a great, big, huge, scary thing that they're lying about, but at the end of the day, we look at it as a misrepresentation is a lie, and that's why the number is so high. 78% of candidates lie. Now, what does that cost you? It's expensive to do hiring. It's very expensive. So if you hire someone and you find out later that they're lying about something on their resume and you have to replace them, it's going to cost you up to 213% of their annual salary to replace them. So again, think about that. If you're hiring an employee and their salary is $100,000 a year, it's going to cost you $213,000 to replace them. So I've always have said, you got to hire slowly. And this is where it's really important to make sure that you know who you're hiring, because now you see the cost and you know what percentage of candidates misrepresent themselves. So please take your time in doing this process. So what's important to check? This is just sort of a high overview. We're going to dig deep into some of these areas. We're going to focus today also on identity verification. But things that are important to check are our reference checks, our employment verifications, professional and designations, education confirmations, criminal checks, credit, employment, social media checks are very important today, as well as ID verification, driver's abstract. And it's also important, we're becoming a global world today, and I think even more so after COVID, we'll be able to hire in different places. So it's important to make sure you're checking your candidates if they're coming from the US or international as well. Digging into a little bit of them, reference checking, as Rachel mentioned at the beginning, we started in 1974 as an executive reference checking company. That was our specialty then. Different times in the early 70s, we were started as an investigative reference checking company where we would call a company where a candidate used to work and we would try to resource and determine our own references from that company. HR became a thing. Obviously, you can't do that today because we live in Canada. You must have consent. You must have the candidate's consent to give you the references. But references, we find, are still a very good indicator on how someone is going to perform for you. And if done properly, it's still a very important part of the onboarding process. In terms of our reference checks, we're a little old school in that regard. We still like to pick up the phone and actually call a reference. We vet that it's not a planted reference because that's something you do have to be careful about today, that it is a planted reference. So you want to make sure that it was not, and there's different ways on doing that, really digging deep into their responsibilities. But reference checking, making sure you've got the right person on the phone and actually conducting the interview via phone is very important because your job is doing the reference check. Here's the key thing is you need to listen to what's not being said. And if you do them in call centers or we've even heard by email, it's not our thing. We don't recommend it. At that point, you're basically just checking a box. We're still old school in that regard, and references are one of our most important things that we can get a lot of value from. Employment verifications. So of those 78% of job candidates that misrepresent themselves, this is where most of it falls into employment verification and education verification. When you're doing an employment verification, it's very important I always typically start with the HR department and see if they will give you the information. Living in Canada, we have to have consent, so you'd be required to send to that person who's verifying it an actual signed consent form. So you must do your employment verifications. There you're going to be verifying position, dates of employment, and reason for leaving. And where we find the most misrepresentation is in position and dates of employment, obviously. So that's why it's really important to take your time and do your proper employment verifications. Education verifications. With desktop publishing today, you can have a degree from anywhere in the world, and trust me, we have actually seen it. Anything can be created. It's still very important to actually call up the institution. We always start with the registrar's office. Again, we have consent from the candidate already. So we're going to go to the registrar's office. We're going to make sure, we're going to find out where the person graduated from. We're going to reach out to the institution. We're going to confirm the information after we send them the consent form that we do have the candidate's permission. If you're hiring internationally, I recommend that you actually check that as well, or anywhere from the US. Institutions don't like talking to you to verify this education. So there's been a lot of side businesses that have come out of that. So if you want to verify a degree in Canada and you call the registrar's office and they won't speak to you, they're probably going to direct you to an organization called Aura Data. That's Aura Data in Canada. They're an education repository where you'll be required to pay a fee to go in and get that education verification complete. You'll also be required to upload the release form, and then they'll send you back the results. The Aura Data is in Canada. There's national student clearinghouses in the US. There's different education repositories where you can go. But again, back to that 78% of candidates misrepresenting themselves, along with the employment, education is probably the next highest thing where they represent themselves. So again, folks, it's really important. You're going to know who you're hiring to check education and employment verifications. Criminal checks. I'm sure we can all think back to 20 years ago, that beautiful blue sky on that September day when that first plane crashed into the building in New York. That day changed our lives forever. And I think in terms of background screening, the biggest change we've seen globally is nobody was doing criminal record checks before 9/11. That became, something that was done after 9/11 because now we really became concerned about who was coming into our workplace, and we started to see the world through a different lens. So that was the beginning of criminal checks in Canada. You must have consent. You can only obtain this information from the RCMP directly. You have to partner through a company such as ours who can get that information for you. And again, needing consent. If you're just doing criminal checks in the US, it's a little different and a little more complicated. And the reason for that is God bless the US, but their criminal record database is public. So you have to make sure that if you're verifying criminal record on a John Smith in Dallas, Texas, you make sure you have the right John Smith, or you could be opening yourself up for a lawsuit. So Criminal records are very important. Almost all of our clients do them today. And again, that's going back to the fallout after 9/11. We really started to become skeptical about who we were bringing into our companies. So if you're not doing a criminal record verification, I highly recommend that you do. Credit reports. If you are hiring anybody who's going to be working in credit in your finance department, I highly recommend that you make sure that you do a credit check for them. There are 2 repositories where you can get that information from. Equifax is one and TransUnion is the other. We partner with Equifax at BNP to run our credit checks. And again, you need to have consent to make sure that that's done. Electronic ID verification. So Rachel was mentioning this. This is our newest product that we've just brought in. We're going to be doing, it's a different world after COVID. And when we all start to get back to work, it's going to be completely different. And there's going to be an opportunity for a lot of fraud to take place. And we're hiring differently now. After COVID, we can hire globally for Canadian companies. We can hire from anywhere in the world because now we've learned how to work remotely. But what's important here is to make sure that the person, again, is who they say they are. And this is our newest product offering that we've done. And this is hugely important. It's based through facial recognition. What we do is we send a link out to the candidate, and that candidate must upload a piece of ID, the front and the back is what they load it into our system. And then they have to take a selfie on their cell phone. And within seconds, it comes back and it actually matches up to make sure that that John Doe is the right John Doe. So that's a very important thing to know when you're hiring, especially remotely. How do you know that the candidate is who they say they are? And I think you're going to find this becoming very important in all hiring processes, the electronic identity verification. So again, this is a brand new product for us. We're excited to be launching it, and everything's going well. And I think, after COVID, companies will be looking to do this. Driver's abstracts. These are very important if you're going to be hiring a driver for your company, especially if they have a company car and you're giving them a company car. I highly recommend you do a driver record check. That's public information once we have consent from the candidate to gather that information. And this is just something that's very important to do. We have one client who has a whole fleet of drivers, and what they do is they actually run a driver's abstract on all of their drivers every 6 months to make sure that their license is valid and still up to date. Social media. All right, so here we go. So the rest of this presentation is going to kind of revolve around social media. This is a very important thing. Something that's important for you to realize is that when we're talking about social media checks, we are going to be talking about publicly available information. Okay, so that's something that's really important to know. You need to have consent, and the candidate needs to know that we are going to be doing a social media check on them. So global online use. You can see that this is really, obviously over time, this has greatly increased. You can just look at these numbers. They're kind of staggering. Everyone's on the internet today, and everyone's usually using social media. And companies are realizing that there's a ton of content out there that can't be ignored when making a hiring decision. So it's a lot of content. So here are just some of the top social media platforms that are being used today. It's surprising that Facebook is still number one. Yeah, Facebook is right up there with being number one. And you can look at the other numbers. Just have a look at these. It is quite interesting to see what the amount of activity that is going on in terms of social media. But I was actually quite surprised myself when I found out that Facebook was still the highest one that's being used in terms of social media. But everyone's on it, so companies are realizing there's a ton of content out there that cannot be ignored when making a hiring decision. It just can't be ignored. So, what is impactful to employment? Quite a few things are. Consumers are holding companies in high values. If one of your clients can easily pull up a quick Google search on a member of your team and find adverse content, your client's probably going to be asking the same question. Why didn't the company do the same thing? And why did they hire this person? Why aren't they doing something about it? Also, outside of external risks, social media can cause a ton of internal problems within a company. So just think about this. Employees are viewing someone making a racist post on Facebook, for example, is equivalent to them standing up in the office and yelling the same thing. This is what we hear all the time. It started in the workplace, ended up online, or it started online and ended up in the workplace. So, areas of concern. These are the areas for businesses that they need to be concerned about. You see a lot of HR buzzwords on here. You see hostility, harassment, bullying, safety. These are all items you would find on a code of conduct or a code of ethics policy. Another major concern here, and maybe the number one reason why large organizations reach out to us, is the risk of bad publicity. Nobody needs an employee's crazy Facebook post hitting the news. And I think a really good example of that is our past president in the US. Some of his information that was hitting the news in terms of social media, so much so that he was actually banned from it. So these are just some areas that we need to be aware of. There is a duty of care that consumers and general public expect companies to take in today's world. That's the reality of it. And efficiently screening a candidate or employee's social media is actually one of those important things. So warning, some content has been blurred out because it may be offensive to some. And my apologies if it is. So here we go. So we aim to protect companies from the bad decision that their employees make in the past. And in a way, we're kind of predicting what kind of decision makers they might be in the future. Sorry if we keep referring back to the US there. We are only, this is really important for you to understand, we are only capable and legally allowed to view publicly available information. Okay, that's important. Only publicly available information. And because of that point, these reports, they're sort of a litmus test of sorts, testing an individual's level of responsibility. Do we want to trust this guy? If someone is the type of person to behave poorly online, well, that's one thing, but if they can produce adverse content and have it out there for the public to see, that's a whole different situation. Can that person be trusted to represent your company? Poor decision-making habits and trends displayed on on social media, I think they tend to lead to further poor decision-makings in other aspects of their life, including the workplace. So this is important. This slide here is right here is why larger organizations especially report to what they don't want to have happen to them. Once it hits the news, your company is in big trouble. We receive Google alerts just about every day involving company X and something one of their employees did on social media. So folks, it's really, really super important to take the time and do this because you don't ever want to see your company in the news for this reason. So probably a lot of HR people on this call, you're thinking, so why can't I just do this in-house? That's our natural instinct. I'm going to do these social media checks myself. So here's some fun facts for you. 90% of employers consider an applicant's social media activity during the hiring process. That's really a high number, 90%. 79% of HR professionals have denied a job to a candidate due to inappropriate content on social media. Now, some people are going back to that. Why can't we do it in-house? First of all, it's extremely cost heavy. The average salary of someone, $17 to $60 an hour, let's just say. If you're anything like me, when you get onto social media, now you're going to start playing this detective. You're going to go down this rabbit hole, down the next rabbit hole. Are you sure you have the right John Smith? And before you know it, hours and hours have come by. And this is where we talk about the cost, how cost heavy it is for you as an employer to do social media checks yourself. You should never be doing them yourself. It's just something that you need to be really super careful about. But here's the biggest thing with this. Once you see something, you can't unsee it. And if you're working in HR and you're seeing sensitive information that cannot be considered when making a hiring decision, hiring managers are putting their organizations at risk. So this is why companies tend to outsource this information to us, just for that very reason, because they're putting themselves at risk by doing it themselves. And back to that, which I just love that comment, you can't unsee something once you've seen it. So let's look at this one here. How many violations can we spot? So let's pull up our friend here, Do-si-do. If we pull her up, immediately, as soon as we open up this page, all kinds of protected class information jumps out at us. Marital status, military status. Or wait, could she be pregnant? These are all things, again, that you cannot use in the hiring decision. There's a lot of violations on this page. Here's some protected class examples. So these are areas where I'm sure we're all familiar with. They definitely cannot be used in a hiring decision. They just can't. Viewing this protected class information can open up some huge liability risks for companies by creating biases, whether it's intentional or not, and often it's not, but it's still there. This is all the information that we can retract out of our reports so that the end user will never know that you were there, as opposed to you yourself going online and researching all this information on yourself, on a potential candidate. They can potentially see that. And because we are becoming more litigious today, it's super important that you be really, really careful about this part of it. I'm just trying to be aware of my time because I know we end at 2:50 and get into the next session. So I'm just going to make sure we get this done in time. So what exactly is a social media report? The following is our approach to social media background screening and details exactly what it is that we're looking for. This here is really important to know. These are areas of risk we look for and we flag in our report. The categories are what counsel likes to refer to as business-related online behavior. We call these the 4 filters, and you can see them. We create these filters through a vast experience of working with many employment specialized lawyers and talking to many HR professionals throughout the year. Everything here is actionable and what can legally be used in a hiring decision. Each of these filters has a set of sub-filters, and we have created clear definitions surrounding each filter and sub-filter. So as a search is conducted, the report is created in the same consistent manner each and every time. That's what's most important with this, is that it's done that way. So how does it work? Just being aware of our time, we got 5 more minutes here. So we have developed a software. We call this our magic software, that we take the candidate's resume and we put it into this software. It goes through, spits out all kinds of information based on what's resume. We enter it all in, bang, goes through the magic software. Then we have to have a human analytics involvement in this, because we have to make sure that we have the right John Doe from Dallas, Texas, or from Montreal, Quebec. We have to make sure. So we do a human analytics. Then we run it through the software again. If we're coming up with a few possible names, we could run this through the software from the resume to the human analytics and back to the software 3 or 4 times until we're actually 100% sure that the information that we're pulling up is for your candidate. And once we are 100% sure that that is it, then we flag that content for you. We will take screenshots. We will show that to you, and we'll pull out protected class information. And this really helps you to make an informed hiring decision. And the question is here, how long does that take? Typically 1 to 3 business days. It's going to depend on the candidate's name and where in the world they live. If it's a very common name, it may have to go through this magic software a couple of times after the human analytics component. So, but on average, we like to say that it takes 1 to 3 business days to complete this. And this is what the final report looks like. Here are some of the features. Each report that has flagged content will show what filters, sub-filters it fell under, where it was found, how we identified the subject. All that information is there. all matched buys are highlighted in green, and flag content will be in red, so it easily jumps off the page at you. Again, everything is flagged as actionable and compliant with all of our privacy rules and regulations. Intelligent data. Oh, this is so important. So around 10% of all reports we run come back with at least one piece of flag content. 10% is a pretty high number, and this will vary depending on the industry, the company, or the job, or the position. So the numbers are staggering, what comes back, and it's just really important to be aware of what is out there. That's it for the official part of the presentation. Because I'm just being aware I've got 2 minutes left. We have to end at 2:50. If anybody wants to reach out to me personally, feel free to email me at Marty, M-A-R-T-Y, at BrittonManagement.com. We do have, I have some information I'd love to send to you on common misconceptions about social media checks and why you as an employer should not be doing them yourself. I'd be happy to send that to you if you want to go ahead and flip me an email. Again, it's Marty, M-A-R-T-Y, at BrittonManagement.com. I would be happy to send that to you. And just being aware that we have 1 minute left and I want to keep on schedule, I'm going to send this back to Rachel.
Thank you so much for that, Marty. That was extremely informative. So if they want to reach out to you, I see that we just put a link for your LinkedIn profile or for your company page. So that's amazing. So I was going to ask you, if you put it in the chat, it's easier for people to click on it directly.
Yeah, you know what? I'm having trouble accessing that chat today. My apologies. We had some
close your screen now. I think it's sometimes it's a little finicky with if you have your screen share on, but if you stop screen sharing, but someone's sharing it for you there, so that's okay.
Yeah, he is. Alex helped me because we had some technical glitches, but
there you go. It's just easier to click on it that way. So if anyone wants to reach out to Marty, please feel free to do so. Obviously, a leader in the industry. You've been around. Your company has been around and has such a great reputation. I mean, you're such an amazing person to deal with. So definitely reach out to BMP. That's my new way of referring to you. I like that.
Way to go. I like that. BMP is too many words the other way.
I know. Well, thank you so much for being here. If you want to reach Marty, her contact information is there. Again, we really appreciate your time. Definitely really important. Obviously, background checks have come increasingly more important in organizations. I've seen a lot of things on my end over the last 15 years of how do I say this, misinterpreted resume information about people.
Yep, misrepresented.
I don't want to say anything negative, but I've seen a lot on, and it's very, I think at the beginning of your presentation, you mentioned the cost of an organization to make the wrong hire based on that. So, hiring a professional service is obviously so important to save that headache, hassle, and monetary part of the recruiting process. So,
absolutely.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And we hope to see you back soon.
Yep. Awesome. Okay. Thanks, Rachel, and enjoy the rest of the day.
You too. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone, for joining.